You know what's not fun? You know there are two seasons in Illinois? Winter and road construction. Winter and road construction. How many like winter? Yeah, some. How many like road construction? Nobody. And because it slows us down, it takes us off our intended route. It's distractions from the original route that we planned to take. You know, when we get in our cars and we're going from here to there, we have a route that we plan to take. And when we hit construction and other things, detours, then that takes us off that route and it slows us down. And we know how we plan to get there, and we get taken out of our game because of that. So a couple days ago, our oldest son is in from England, and he's been here. He'll be going back this Wednesday. But he was going to Joliet, and so Jody and I said, now, you probably want to go this way because there's some uneven surfaces here, and there's some potholes there, and you can, and apparently we went on for a period of time because he said to Jody, my wife Jody, he said, you guys talked about 30 minutes and told me how to get somewhere I've been to a million times. Did you know that? Which is exactly what my grandfather used to do to me. So Jody and I had a good laugh about the whole thing. And I don't know, you know, we always take, when we get on I-80 heading east or go to Oswego or Yorkville or Naperville, we do the cut across on Dayton Road. And so one day I'm driving on the route and I'm running just in time, and there's a sign that says, road closed, detour, go that way. And being the smart person that I am, I said, they don't really mean it. They're just fooling me. And sure enough, the bridge was closed. So I had to back up and go all the way. Okay. So I called Neil because he lives on the other side of the bridge. And I don't know. I guess I was just looking for somebody to blame. And I said, Neil, why is your bridge closed? What'd you close the bridge for? It inconvenienced me. Most of us don't like detours and roadblocks. And as believers, we have to understand that we have a destiny. And God has an eternal destiny, that's heaven, and his new kingdom. But he has a destiny for us here and now. And sometimes, here we go, sometimes that destiny involves detours. How many like detours? Yeah, okay. And so God has a plan for our life and for our existence. We're here on purpose. It's not by accident. He has things for us to do, but sometimes there are detours along the way that help us be better prepared for what he wants us to do. I know, no amens here. I get it. All right. Our purpose here is not just to get a job, not just to get a paycheck, not just to pay bills, not just to have fun on the weekends. We have a purpose. God has a stamp on our lives, something he wants us to do, something that we can do better than anybody else. And we had a funeral service yesterday, memorial service for Donna Hanson, and her life was a testimony to that fact, that there was an eternal purpose in mind. And she touched a lot of lives. I said it yesterday at the funeral. I said it again to the worship team this morning. We had people that had written things about Donna, which is very nice, and they read them. And the interesting thing between the reading and what people had said was that so many of the things that were said matched up. Like from when she was young and back in the dating days with Ron until she was current day, people said the same thing: kind, gracious, loved Jesus more than anything else, trusted God more than anything else, loved her family. Those things remain consistent through the years. God has a plan for us. It's an eternal plan, but he also has a plan for us now. Donna touched a lot of lives, so she wasn't often up front here. She wasn't in a position of any type, but she touched a lot of lives. What purpose does God have for our lives? It's more than getting a job, collecting a paycheck, paying bills, and having fun on weekend. But in our walk with the Lord, rarely do we go from point A to point B without stop-offs at X, Y, or Z. It's the way it works. And I want to give you some examples of that. But what do we do about roadblocks and detours in our faith journey? Maybe better question, what do we know about that? So the first thing we know is that God uses detours as part of his design for our lives. And I'm going to use one word for that, the word purpose. God has a purpose for us. Moses had a detour. It was a 40-year detour. How many like 40-year detours? And the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord was gone. And Moses was part of that. He never got to go he got to stand on the mountain and watch, but he didn't get to actually go into the promised land. He was put on the whole nation was wandering around in the desert because they wouldn't accept God's plan. And his plan was to raise up a generation that would go in and possess the promised land. How about Abraham? Abraham. He was on a 25-year detour. The Lord said to Abraham, "Go from your country and your kindred to your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I'll make your name great so that you'll be a blessing, and I'll bless those who bless you. And him who dishonors you I will curse, and in all of the families of the earth, through you all the families of the earth will be blessed." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed. God gave Abraham all this information. How old was he? 75 years old. How many of you are older? No, never mind. Don't go there. 75 years old. And then later, it says, "And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the time which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God commanded. And Abram was, do you have it up there? How old? It's right there. How much? Let's see how good you are at math. 100 minus 75. 25 years he waited. So God says, look, I'm going to make you a great nation, your descendants. Wow, more than anybody will ever be able to count. It's going to be tremendous. You are blessed among all others. And then year 1 goes by. No children, no child. Year 2 goes by. 3 goes by. 4 goes by. All the way up to 25 years. That's a detour. But he needed to learn things. One of my favorites is this one. You may not know this, but the Apostle Paul goes on a 3-year detour. You remember Paul was persecuting Christians, and he was after them, and God struck him blind and said, I want you to, you're going to go here. And he went to Ananias, and he said, God has chosen you, and he's going to use you, and he's going to use you powerfully. And he gave him this promise. But you know that Paul didn't immediately go and preach like we know he did all these missionary journeys. He did a little preaching, he did some, but he spent 3 years learning what God wanted him to learn before he went out. 3 years. So you got this promise. I know I'm supposed to do this. But it took him 3. What happened in that 3 years? Well, Paul was a learned person in the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, right? And he didn't believe anything about Jesus until he had a personal encounter with him. And then his whole he was persecuted. He thought they were a cult. He thought they were bad. He thought they needed to be eliminated. And so he's after them. And then he has this revelation that Jesus really is who he said he was. And now he has to match up what he knows about the Old Testament, which he knows a lot. He has to match up the prophecies and all that he knows from the Old Testament, and he has to match that up with what Jesus' life was. And he needed to consult with other people the other leaders, the pillars of the church. He had to consult with them, and he had to take some time to be able to understand what it meant. I'm glad he took that time because he became very, very powerful. Wrote many books of the New Testament because of that. But he was on a detour, and he might have wondered, well, they told me I was going to go out and I was going to do this, and why am I waiting here? So God uses detours for his purpose, for his design. And just like these biblical figures, God takes us on detours to develop us for his purpose. So, if you're on a detour, why? What is God wanting to do in your life? Are you fighting it? Secondly, God uses detours to prepare us for our future. Kind of what I've said, but I want to prepare, and that's kind of what he did with Paul. But also with Joseph. Remember the story of Joseph. God reveals to Joseph details of his destiny, but Joseph is not mature enough to handle it. God gives Joseph dreams that tell them that are indicative of who he's going to be, but he's only 17 years old. And this is what it says. There are generations. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph was 17 years old. He was pasturing the flock with his brothers. Let's learn a little bit about him, all right? He was a boy. They considered 17 a boy, I guess, with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah and his father's wives. So he's with his brothers, and Joseph is out with them. And then he comes back to his dad, and he brings back a bad report. What's the word we use for that? Tattling. You know what my brothers are doing, don't you? They're not working very hard. They're looking at the Philistine girls. I made that up. And then he says to them, hear this dream. I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field. And behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf. Oh yeah, that's going to win friends and influence people. And then he dreamed another dream, and he told it to his brothers, and he said, behold, I've dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars are bowing down to me. He unwisely tells everybody about this dream. Sometimes when God tells you something, you don't need to tell everybody. First, you can be wrong. And second, it might not be the right timing. I'm going to back up here a second because I skipped the whole reading, but I want to make this point. I don't want to forget to do it. So, Israel loved Joseph more than all of his sons. I'm in Genesis 37, verse 3. So it may take you, this isn't in the queue right away, so I know you can't find it quickly. Israel loved Joseph more than all his other sons. He was the son of his old age. And he made him a varicolored or multicolored garment, tunic. And his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all the brothers, so they hated him. Put one finger up. They hated him. They hated him. And now, Joseph has a dream, and he tells it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. Put two fingers up. Then he says, please listen to the dream. And then his father says, are you really going to rule over us? So they hated him 3 times. Let me tell you what, they got a good hate going on here, you know. And then he has another dream, and his father rebukes him, and his brothers are jealous of the dream. So Joseph is not winning friends and influencing people. He's being unwise. He needs time to learn because God wants to do great things through Joseph, but he's not ready yet. He unwisely tells everybody the dream, and they're not ready to accept it. So let's talk about Joseph's journey into slavery for just a bit. God allowed him to become acquainted with the Egyptian culture, government, and language, which was necessary. But the road he had to go on was not good. Then there's another part of the story. So let me take it in order here. Joseph really upsets his brothers. They hate him, right? Hate him. How many times did they hate him? How many times were they jealous of him? 1. So they're not his fan. And so he comes walking out, Hey, brothers, how you doing? And they say, there he is. We're going to get him. That big tattletale. We're not putting up with that anymore. Who does he think he is? And so they grab him, they throw him into a dry well, and they're debating whether to kill him. Most of them wanted to eliminate him. How's that for brotherly love? Not so good. Then they see some people coming by, and they say, I know what to do. Let's don't kill him. Let's sell him. That's a good idea. So they sell him. And he goes to work for a ruler in Egypt, and he ends up running the whole household. He becomes very important. But the ruler has a wife. Let me go to this, 39, around verse 7. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, lie with me. That did not mean tell a fib. He refused and said to his master's wife, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house. He's put everything in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor have I kept back anything back from him. He has not kept anything back from me except you, because you're his wife. Then how can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? But she spoke to Joseph day after day, day after day. Come lie with me. And he wouldn't listen to her. And one day she says, come lie with me. He goes, no. And he goes running out. She catches the garment. It rips. And she's got part of it. And she makes up a story. She says to her husband, look what he did to me. So Joseph gets sold as a slave. He rises up because of his talent. And then did he do the right thing by running or not? You should be more convinced of that than that. I don't know. He did. He did the right thing. And yet he got thrown in jail for doing the right thing. Would anybody else ask why? You ever ask why? I have. Why? Why does this happen? Why? It's hard to understand when we're in the middle of asking why. But God has a purpose and a plan, because Joseph was still learning. So let's review. His family hates him. He's thrown into a well. He's sold and purchased. He's falsely accused. He's thrown in jail. But God still has a destiny for Joseph. He's being matured. He's learning lots of things about the culture, the language, and all of that. He's had to adapt. You know, in life, you have to adapt. In life, you have to adapt. How many like routines? You like routines? You like things in a certain spot? Yeah? Some of you do? You know, I like it when I can reach and find my tool without. I like it when I can reach over and get my shaving cream because I know right where it is. Occasionally somebody from England might come home and move stuff, and that messes me up. No names, no names. Yeah, since he's in England, we blame him no matter what. He's not there to defend himself. Although each of our journeys looks different, God takes us on detours to prepare us for the things he has in store for us in the future. God used all this time, and I'm sure Joseph didn't understand it at the time. Let me move on. As we experience detours, sometimes things will get worse before they get better. Key word, problems. First key word was purpose. Second key word was prepare. Third key word, problems. Problems. You'll hit problems. That's a detour. That's a roadblock. We don't like problems. But I remind us, I say this, when things are going good, it's easy to say this. When things are not going good, it's hard to say it. This is not heaven. We're not in heaven yet. This is earth. Heaven is the next step. His brother said to him, are you indeed going to reign over us? Are you going to rule over us? And they hated him. They hated him even more. There's troubles, and they resent him. Troubles. He's stripped of that fancy coat that his dad gave him. The coat he shouldn't have given him. You know, kids should be treated the same. He's stripped of that multicolor. Everything is going wrong. He's hitting trouble after trouble after trouble, and we've gone through some of it. He's falsely accused, probably the worst one, because he's trying to be upright in his actions and in what he does. And the accusation is, this is the way, Potiphar's wife says, this is the way your servant treated me. And Potiphar's anger was kindled against Joseph. No fault of his own. He spends years in prison before he's able to interpret by God's help, a dream that Pharaoh has, and that's what gets him out of prison. But all those years, 13 years before God gives him these dreams that say he's going to rule, 13 years go by, and they weren't great 13 years for the most part. Point. Even though most detours are difficult and seem as though life is getting worse, they are part of God's design to prepare us for the future. And that's what they did. As you know, Joseph went on to become ruler of all of Egypt except for Pharaoh himself. Joseph stored food that saved the lives of not only the Egyptians, but of his own family. I don't know what Joseph went through totally. We went to a play in Branson that was on the life of Joseph, and they showed in that play him struggling with forgiving his brothers. Now, I'm not sure I've read that, but it could be that, you know, when he went in the back room and wept and he didn't immediately reveal who he was, they used that to say, he's wrestling, they treated him terrible, how is he going to react to them in return? And I don't know if that's the case or not, but I know that Joseph went from being a little cocky and a tattletale and from being unwise to being measured and wise, and he learned a lot of things, and he saved the lives of a lot of people, and it wouldn't have happened without the things that happened to him. Think about what his last statement is. It's the last chapter of Genesis, and his brothers are afraid because, you know, in that day, in that tribal kind of society, if you became in power, you know, if a king became in power, they would usually kill the previous king's family, everybody, so they couldn't come back on him. There was kind of this mentality. His brothers were scared to death. What was going to happen after Joseph's father died? His father dies, and they're frightened, and Joseph says, don't be frightened. What you meant for evil, God, help me, God meant for good. You know it. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. But in the process, there was a purpose that God had. There was a preparation that needed to happen. There were problems that Joseph faced that might have crushed other people. But there was an ultimate promise at the end of that. And it's important for us to know when we hit roadblocks, we might hit some of that same pattern in our lives. And we need to ask, God, what are you wanting to do with me? What is it that you want to accomplish in me? What is your purpose for my life? And what I'm going through now, is there some connection here that I need to understand to fulfill your purpose in my life? Let's stand together. Excuse me. It's very exciting to be in God's plan and to be used by God. I've said to many people, I've had a lot of different experiences in my life. I think every one of them somehow has helped in ministry. And at the time, you would never think it. But everyone has helped and helped prepare for what I'm doing now. And that's the same for all of us. The first question we should ask the Lord is, what is your purpose in my life? What is it you want to accomplish through me? And the second thing that's a good thing to ask is, when we go through detours and roadblocks, to ask, Lord, what is it that you want me to learn? What is it that I need to gain from this experience? Now, you may say, how do I know if it's a godly detour? And how do I know if it's something from some other reason? Well, I'm going to talk about that next week. But right now, I just want you to bow your heads, close your eyes. And I first want to ask if there are those here today that say, I don't know what my purpose is. That's a starting point. And I want to pray with you about that. Would you just slip your hand up? Yes, 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 yes. Balcony, yes. Others? Thank you. You can put your hands down. And let me ask a second question. Maybe you're going through something now and you can't understand it. I understand that, but I want to pray with you about it. If that's you, would you slip your hand up? Yes. Yes. Okay. Lord, you see those and you know our hearts and you know all the ins and outs. Before people raised their hands, you knew the answer to those questions. But Lord, for those who said, I don't know what my purpose is, I believe that you have a plan for all of us, Lord. And sometimes it takes a bit of searching to find that. I pray that you would reveal that to those that are searching, that you would lead them, you would guide them, and that they would discover your plan for their life. We're all here for a reason. Otherwise, the minute we got saved, you'd have taken us home. And Lord, for those that are going through difficulties, it could be anything. I'm not even going to try to name. You know what they are. I pray, Lord, that when it seems like nothing makes sense, why is this happening? When we ask that question, Lord, that you would help, that you would say, I have this. This is under my control. I'm leading, and I'll reveal that to you. I pray that you would give that confidence and help. And thank you, Lord, that we're not just here wandering aimlessly, but you have a purpose for us. We thank you for this in Jesus' name.